All right, good morning. So I'm back again to talk a little bit about this is in a way a continuation of my sweet spot video. So the sweet spot video is not about all role playing. It's about the sweet spot in D20, finding the simulation portion with the abstraction slash narrative portion. There's a sweet spot, right? So anyway, now I want to talk about rule books in general, but in particular, this book, this particular game. And this could be taken to any rule book, right? So what is in this book tells us more. So what is in this book tells us more about how we're doing it, what we're doing, and why we're doing it, than what is not in this book. And I'll talk about why that matters. This is why you shouldn't take rule books in part and parcel, right? This is why you shouldn't cherry pick rule books. You can create your own homebrews and tweaks. Obviously, we all have. But if I look at this as a whole, I know exactly what I'm supposed to do and how to adjudicate this, despite there being things that appear to be not here and why they're not here. So this game, how would I adjudicate? So I guess the best title for this video is, how would I adjudicate White Box? Fantastic medieval adventure game. And again, this is not all role-playing. This is not all OSRs. This is not all gaming. This is this particular game. But what we can learn from rule books as a whole entity, not just pieces. Part one, characters. Characters are the mechanical device in which players interact with the mechanics of the game. They are actually game mechanics, right? So a character is a mechanic. Your character as a role player has nothing to do with your class and your role as a mechanical device. Cholerics are a mechanical device to do certain things in this rule book, right? Not Brother Harold and his role in the world. Choleric and his mechanical role in the party and his mechanical role in the game. In this particular game, mostly dungeon crawl, mostly simulation over narrative, right? Okay. Now, that is what characters are. Therefore, your character is capsulized, right? The fighter has a particular ability. The cleric, the thief, all of them have their role, their particular thing they do. Has nothing to do with the character you choose to play. It has to do with how you interact with the mechanics of the game. Okay, I think everybody knows that, but I want to make this clear because it's going to make another point about skills. So people who say, I love games with skills, and they make a great argument as to why skills are relevant. And I don't disagree with that. If I'm going to play Traveler, I need skills. If I'm going to play Savage Worlds, we have skills. There's a reason skills exist, because we use skills. This doesn't have skills. But what does this have that makes up for skills? This particular book, I will point this out to our my players. I point this out to you here. I don't know if anybody's ever discussed this with most players, but this particular book, one of the reasons I love this particular book, we don't have skills. Every class has its thing. But we have this thing called assistants, hirelings, right? So Joe says, hey, I want to mix a potion and create a poison. He's the thief. And I say, there's no rule for that. And they go, yeah, but come on, man, I got to be able to make a poison. No, but you can go hire an alchemist to mix it for you. And you might be able to find an alchemist in the nearest big town. You can ask around. You can find out. And of course, there's a price you're going to have to pay to get an alchemist. But if you can get that tool, that alchemist, and pay him the price, there'll be some machinations. How long will it take him to make it? How poisonous is it? And what will it cost? There might be some negotiation, but you have an alchemist. You want to sell on a ship, you need a captain of the ship. If not, you're not going to know where the hell you're going. It matters. You don't have the skills. You can't get the skills, but you can hire a captain. You want a cavalry? You don't have the skills to be a horse rider. You can ride a horse. You can buy a horse. You can ride a horse. It's assumed. But I want a 5-man cavalry for this assault we're going to put on the goblins. A horse rider only cost me 3 gold. Dude, 15 gold. I'm hiring 3 horse riders, and I've got a cavalry. Bingo, right? I need to build a siege engine for the goblin headquarters. I hire an engineer, 200, right? So we don't need skills. We hire those who do have those skills, or the characters that exist in the world that do have that role, right? Your role as a cleric is what's defined. Your role as an elf, your role as a fighter, your role as a dwarf, they're defined. Yep, you don't get to be the captain of the ship and a dwarf, but you can hire a captain of a ship. Now we have quests. They got to travel to the big city to find a captain. What kind of captain are they going to get? What's it going to cost them? What's this guy going to be like? It's adventure. Just hiring a boat captain for a short little ocean sea voyage can end up being a great session, right? Use hirelings, right? Use specialists if the book has them, right? As their skills. If you want a spy, great example, right? They know there's a hole in the ground dungeon, and they're all level 1, and they're all a little bit worried about what's in that dungeon. They can go hire a spy and say, listen, just go investigate that dungeon for us. It can be a skill check, in a way, a information gathering check, but they have to pay the 125 gold to hire the spy, send the spy off, and they make a simple roll, and that spy will come back with, or it won't come back, right? Either end up dead or will come back and tell you what they can tell you. So use the spy as your information check, but they got to have the gold, and that's part of the reason why they should adventure. It's why they sell stuff. That's why they're doing this, so they can have the gold to hire these skills, right? Number 2, again, I talked about this, and this is kind of funny because Scott pointed out Matt Colville's thing, and I did watch it last night, and I think he shares a similar attitude about this that I do. But every book as a whole should be treated first and foremost as a whole, because they are rules as a whole. Again, there is no hunting tackle on this. There is no fishing tackle. There is no hunting snares. There are no traps. There are no foragers in the game. There are no hunters in the game. There are no abilities to do those things. You need rations, especially in a dungeon, right? There's nowhere you're going to forage or hunt in a dungeon unless you cannibalize your victims, right? Which you could well do. Players might be reduced to having to eat goblins, right? Okay, that's gross, but it's part of what happens in an adventure, right? Okay. So rations are on this list. Anything on this list means you need to have it to achieve it. You don't get to hand wave, or you can hand wave it, but GMs do it all the time. But this list does mean something, right? It's not irrelevant. And every one of these tools allow you to either do it automatically or allow you to do it at all, right? You're going to dig a hole, and I've challenged somebody right now. If you think you don't need a shovel to go dig a hole, I dare you. Go outside right now with a pencil, a pen, a spoon, or your bare hands and try to dig a hole. We'll see we'll see how long you want to dig a hole. Because, dude, without a shovel, you ain't wanting to dig any serious holes, right? So it matters, right? It matters. And I think that's important stuff, right? Light. We know that invisibility or darkness is a -4 to hit modifier. So light matters because you're going to all be at -4 to hit, unless, of course, you have dark vision, which some do. I think elves and dwarves have dark vision. So they're going to have a little bit of a Benny in the dark, right? So you might want to make sure one of your characters in the party at least can see something, right, in the dark. And the next big thing I want to talk about, why do I know food and water matters? There's no foraging, hunting, fishing in the rules. There's no pieces of the rules that talk about it. And here's the other big reason I know that it's important. A first level choleric spell has purified food and water, right? If we aren't thinking it matters, then why do we have a first level purify food and water spell? How do I know it's even more important than that? You say that's just a first level spell. Screw it. Okay, fine. To be a level 7 choleric in this particular game, just to give you an idea of how I know this stuff matters, right? You can ignore it. Again, all this stuff is your prerogative, right? But I'm getting to a point about why rules matter. What's not in this book, what's in this book informs me as well as what is not in this book. And what is in this book? A level 7 choleric, level 7, 48,000 XP. Level 3 is 3,000 XP. So I have to be level 7, 48,000 XP to have one 5th level spell. One 5th level spell. Now you tell me how many adventures do you think this son of a gun has survived? How many adventurers out there have ever seen level 7 at all? So they're telling me to have one level 5 spell, I'm going to be a badass, okay? Now my point about being a badass. What is a level 5 spell? How important is eating, drinking, food, and water? Level 5 spell for choleric. Create food and drink. So the minute I allow foraging, the minute I allow hunting, the minute I allow fishing, I have made them as powerful as a 5th level choleric. Now, granted, there'll be people screaming at me, no, dude, but you can create a lot of food. Yeah, you can create food to feed 24 living things, horses, pigs, people, right? But let's say I have an army. I've hired 10 soldiers, and I invent foraging rules. And I say, the GM says, yeah, fine, you can forage. And I send my 10 soldiers out to forage. They all make a die 6 check. they're bringing back enough food to feed 10 people, right? 10 one dice 6 people or something. So when you create rules like that, you're undermining other important things. So what's in this tells me as much about the game as what is not in this, right? This is primarily a dungeon crawl, obviously hex crawl. I use this for hex crawling and dungeon crawling. And I will probably reevaluate my attitude about ammunition, because I think Colville makes a great argument about ammunition. If they're in the dungeon or they're in the desert, and we count arrows as spent, they're used, they're broken, they're unusable, they have been used. Now it matters, right? You start deciding how bad do you want to use melee, how bad do you want to use your missile weapons in this particular fight. You might want to save those distance weapons, right? And so I think I'm doing a disservice to the ammunition. I made that remark, but I think Colville makes a great point. I agree with it about food and water. I agree with it about light. I definitely now I'm thinking, yeah, we should be. You can't retrieve your arrows. There's no rule in your retrieve arrows. You can't make arrows because you're not a fucking boy or whatever they're called, right? There is no skill, right? Matter of fact, you can't even hire one. You cannot hire a boy or whatever the hell they're called to make bows and arrows. There's no manufacturing. You got to remember this too. I might have. I'm going to be in certain situations where I can actually walk in and purchase arrows, or I'm going to need to hire a blacksmith to craft arrows. It makes the game that much more interesting. How important is it to John, who's down to 2 arrows, and we're in a little tiny village camp, and we've been foraying back and forth to a mega dungeon, and he decides he's going to town to hire a blacksmith. And that's now an expenditure, and you bring a blacksmith back to camp. It becomes a great NPC they can talk to, etc. And he's able to put together so many arrows in so many days or something, right, for the group. And because you're not going to go to Walmart and buy more arrows, right? You're not going to Walmart to buy more, snacks, right? That stuff all matters to me. So when I talk about this stuff, I'm talking about a particular thing. So my sweet spot video is really about the sweet spot of old D&D, not all role playing, right? Clearly, every game has its own place, and if you want a certain style, you should be playing PBTA. You should be playing. You should be playing Dark Age of Man. You should be playing Symbaroum. You should be playing superheroes. You should be playing Savage Worlds. If you want a particular thing, Call of Cthulhu, right? This is a rule book. This is a game rule book that creates a particular event at the table in a social climate for people to do a particular thing. In general, not liking classes, that's a preference, and it's an in general concept. It doesn't pertain to this book. If you don't like class-based games, do not play White Box, right? Play something else. So I'm not making grand statements that every game should be White Box. I'm talking about White Box in general or D20. So anyway, I think it's pretty interesting. But what do we know, right? What do we know about how important food and drink is? It's not what's not in here, it's what is in here. And if I read the whole rule book and I don't take it in pieces and I don't cherry pick what's important and I don't ignore the value of the cleric at level 7 being able to create food and water, I begin to recognize how important purchasing rations are and eating rations is. You can hand wave all that stuff away, and many people do, right? And I have. I'm not saying I don't. I have done that for very much of the majority of my gaming. Now, when I run games, I try to run them raw with, if there's optional rules or there's certain tweaks that I feel is good for the group, or I feel is good for the right culture of people, or I just don't like because it changes something about the game, right? They're going to get this rules as written. And I'm part of the reason I'm making these videos as I prepare for this upcoming campaign with them is I need to make sure I've got my shit together, right? It's part of my responsibility as a GM to know what the hell I'm doing for them and to give them a certain experience. And I think they should get the experience that this is not basic fantasy. This is not white hack. This is not every D20 game ever made. It's just not. It's not even Matt Finch's White Box, right? It's not Sword and Wizardry complete. It's not Sword and Wizardry Continue Life. Every one of those games, by what they define and what they don't define, actually create a slightly different experience. This creates a particular thing. This is an incredibly complete rule book. And for $5 as an OSR, I think it's genius. So I just want to talk about that, a little more about that, because I do believe it will create a climate of trepidation when they go into the dungeon. It creates a climate, though. They better have enough food. And they can't just say, I'm going to go hunting or fishing, and they're going to forage. Nope. And there's going to be effects for not feeding yourself. Now, overland travel, we could probably have some type of idea about that, right? Because rations are clearly invented for dungeon crawling. You're not foraging berries, nuts, and capturing rabbits in a dungeon, right? The dungeon, there's two things. Number one, the dungeon is either a cavernous, very dangerous, infested with monsters type of thing. If you think there's anything left in a dungeon that the goblins haven't already eaten or cooked, right? You're going to have to eat their rats stew. You're going to have to cannibalize them, or you're going to have to eat whatever goblins eat, right? So you could do that, right? And again, players have had to eat the goblin thing that they were cooking when they killed the goblins. It happens all the time, right? They got to eat whatever so those things are important. And I think it makes for great stories. It makes for great role play. And I've said it before, the mechanism of your character class is the actual mechanism that you actually relate to the world in the game logic. Your character is not to be confused with your game mechanism. You can be Brother Timothy, stoic, angry, bitter, thinks his God has messed it all up, or you can be Brother Joey, who's young and sweet, naive, etc., etc. But they're both cholerics, and they both have a particular mechanical device that affects play. And that is the thing, right? That is the thing. All right, I've ranted enough about this. Thanks. Bye-bye. Happy Thanksgiving.